Hello everyone and welcome to Business Africa, your update on the African economy. I'm Nyasha K Mutizwa. Top stories this week. In Chad, experts from the public and private sectors brainstormed together with development partners on practical ways of raising funds for financing industrialization in Central Africa. Crude oil prices hit a 4-year high as U.S. sanctions on Iranian crude exports loom, and OPEC and Russia declined to raise output. South African Airways Chief Executive Vuyani Jarana believes that the embattled airline is making steady progress in line with the 2021 plan in order to become profitable again. How can economies finance industrialization in Africa? The main question posed by delegates who recently convened at the 34th session of the Intergovernmental Committee of Experts, ICE, of Central Africa and Chad. The experts identified that the process in the sub-region requires clear visions, strong institutions, and a sound macroeconomic environment. Eric Oteng and Serge Kofi give us the details.
About 100 experts met in N'Djamena at the 34th Intergovernmental Committee of Experts from Central Africa session to propose solutions for sustainable and innovative financing to promote industrialization. We discussed the challenges of industrialization. Today, we already have some very important tracks. First, it must be said that there are funds that are not used to support industrialization. For example, we talked about pension funds, where there's $400 billion not being used to finance the productive sectors. Some of the obstacles to sustainable financing of industrial projects in Central Africa include low tax burdens, prohibitive conditions in accessing loans, low national savings rates, but more importantly, the stability and security of the states. Industrialization in the Central African sub-region is facing a serious challenge. In our Central African countries, the only source of financing available at the moment is the banking sector. However, bank financing is short-term. That is, it rarely exceeds 5 years. A loan of 5 years maximum cannot really allow to establish a process of industrialization in a country. The reflection and debate on industrialization in Central Africa was the result of a process launched in 2017 in Douala. Inadequate infrastructure and environmental challenges were also identified.
Crude oil prices shot to a 4-year high on Tuesday, catapulted by imminent U.S. sanctions on Iranian crude exports and the apparent reluctance of OPEC and Russia to raise output to offset the potential hit to the global supply. The oil price is on course for its 5th consecutive quarterly increase, the longest stretch of gains since early 2007. The report with Michael Dibier and Cedric Sehosolo.
The prices of oil globally on Tuesday hit a 4-year high of 81.48 a barrel after Saudi Arabia and Russia rejected calls from the U.S. to increase production amid looming sanctions against Iranian oil. OPEC and non-OPEC members in Algeria snubbed the calls of the U.S. President Donald Trump. Executive Chairman of Energy Capital Research Group, Kent Moore, said domestic politics in the United States drove Trump to require OPEC to raise oil production.
OPEC has been through this before. The Saudis have been through this before. The Saudis are very comfortable with Brent prices in the mid-80s per barrel, and they've said as much over the last couple of weeks. If it extends much beyond $90, so much the better. They have 60% of the reserve capacity of all of OPEC.
Trump had insisted a 15-member oil cartel keep crude prices low because of the military protection the U.S. provided for the region. OPEC leader Saudi Arabia and its biggest oil producer ally outside the group, Russia, rebuffed Trump's demand to lower prices and failing to provide answers on how they could counter failing supplies from Iran. Trump had told China, India and Turkey to cut all imports of Iranian oil by November 4, when the U.S. reimposes sanctions against Iran.
Now, to talk more about this, we're joined on the line by Constantin Tati, an expert in the oil trading industry. Welcome. Now, Mr. Tati, how long do you think that this new global price increase in oil can be sustained?
Markets expect trends to reverse in the coming years because production in the United States and elsewhere will probably increase as producers benefit from rising oil prices. So in the long term, we do not see the possibility of significantly high prices. On the contrary, the demand for petroleum products will continue to increase and decrease in developed countries due to environmental rules, which would become increasingly stricter, and as electric vehicles multiply. The World Energy Council forecasts a peak around 2030. India and Germany will at this time have totally switched to electric cars. So that's to say that prices will be around $60 to $70 a barrel, but there will be no further increase.
So do you see it extending much beyond $90 in the coming weeks or months? And what do you think are the effects of that?
Forecasting the price above $90 per barrel of oil, in all likelihood, is not possible. This is more like $60, $70 or $80 maximum, because the United States will resume investments in the oil sector, which it recently reduced. Then it should be remembered that environmental restrictions and rules are becoming increasingly stricter in the consumer countries. A peak has even been planned for 2030, and because already with the impact of climate change, all countries around the world are increasingly opting for renewable energy.
So do you think that this whole drama between the U.S. and the sanctions on Iran will further affect global oil production? And what will be the effects on Africa?
It is true. We cannot cite a single factor when we want to explain the evolution of the price of a barrel of oil. There are many other factors, such as prices. First, it is the forces of supply and demand in a global context. While there has been some price increase, it is strongly linked to the recovery of the global economy, especially in emerging economies, and on the other hand, the United States, which has cut investment in the oil sector. There is also the declining value of the US dollar. So it is all this that helps to explain the evolution of the price of crude. If we continue to threaten Iran, if we continue to observe instability in the Middle East, it can indeed contribute to the drop in production, which can have a direct impact on prices.
Thank you very much, Constantin Tati, our expert, giving us insight on the crude oil sector. After the break, we head to the south of the continent, where the South African Airways CEO is seeing progress on the 2021 plan to profit.